The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We've talked about Carly Fiorina. She is a Republican presidential candidate. She's the former CEO of Hewlett-Packard, most well known for completely bungling her management of that company, laying off tens of thousands of people as she shipped jobs overseas and then leaving with a $20 million golden parachute. At least that's what she's known for to me. And it now has been revealed that, you might remember in 2010, she unsuccessfully ran for senator. And her opponents during that time were slamming her record at Hewlett-Packard. And it now turns out she also took 4 years to pay her staffers for that campaign. Remember, she is a multi-millionaire. And the San Francisco Chronicle reported in the past that up until last year, she was close to $500,000 in debt from her 2010 run, most of it unpaid compensation. Just she had not paid campaign staffers, outside consultants, all sorts of people. According to Federal Election Commission filings, they also complained, the unpaid staffers, that they weren't even being clearly told when they were going to get paid. So, obvious question, why did it take a multi-millionaire 4 years to pay staffers that worked on her campaign?
Because I think she is waiting for that money to come from somewhere else. She does not want to, she just doesn't want to fork it over. And the red flag, if you are told right off the bat that, they aren't sure when they'll be able to pay you, you must really love Carly Fiorina if you agree to work for her under those conditions.
This reminds me of that Mitt Romney story. I don't remember the exact details, but wasn't it like the night he lost to President Obama, the corporate credit cards for staffers were canceled. They pulled payment for the hotel rooms that the staffers were even paying for that night, left a bunch of them stranded altogether. It seems like this is not unique to Carly Fiorina. It's not a common thing to all candidates, but we certainly seem to get a story like this just about every election cycle.
Yeah, when you maybe win or lose, when those candidates are clapping their hands for you and they're saying, what a great job our staff has done. I think chances are they really do not give a crap about any of you.
I think that when the candidates win, it's far less likely this would happen, though. Don't you think?
Less likely, yeah. I don't remember us covering any stories or something like this happening with a candidate who won. But the whole thing is just pretty despicable.
You know what I've learned from candidates like Mitt Romney and Carly Fiorina? That running a company, successfully or unsuccessfully, does not make you qualified to be president of the United States. And that is one of the most bogus arguments. We heard it during the Romney campaign. Babe Buchanan came on our show, and I asked her, what evidence do you have that someone who's a good business person would be a good president? She had none. And I think at this point, we have confirmed this, haven't we? It's a faulty idea. There's a total disconnect when the candidate or their supporters think, oh, they ran a company, they'd be a good president. No evidence of that.
There isn't. And Carly Fiorina did not seem to be successful. It seemed like she was unsuccessful. And so
who's more likely to be a good president? Someone who ran a company successfully or someone who did not even run a company successfully? I don't actually know.
Well, I don't know. I guess you can learn a lot from your mistakes, but I think either way here, business does not equate to a successful presidency.
There's a new poll from PPP of national Republicans, and it is just insane what the poll reveals. One thing it reveals is that Scott Walker seems to be the preferred candidate for Republicans right now, even though Scott Walker has not actually declared that he's running for president in 2016. But question 23 on the poll, and we will link to the poll in the description to the YouTube video for this topic. Question 23 in the poll is, do you think that the government is trying to take over Texas or not? 32% of Republicans responded that the government is trying to take over Texas. 40% said that the government is not trying to take over Texas. And 28% aren't sure if the government is trying to take over Texas. Now, maybe the 28% are people who just didn't even understand the question because it's such an insane question. But what the hell is going on? A third of Republicans think the federal government is trying to take over the state of Texas. What does that mean?
I'm not sure what that means because, technically the government already controls Texas.
Yeah, that's the thing. To the extent that the government controls any state, Texas is already one of 50 states. But what further, what beyond that do people think the federal government, or really Obama, is trying to do?
That I'm not sure. A hostile takeover. Who really controls Texas? Well, that would be oil companies and big corporations. Maybe Obama's trying to take those over.
Also, some interesting notes from this new poll of national Republicans. 24% of Republicans currently consider themselves members of the Tea Party. Does that strike you as high or low, Lewis? 1 out of 4 Republicans say, I consider myself a Tea Partier.
That does seem high.
It seems high to me as well.
Yeah, I would not have predicted that. And that's kind of scary, right?
That is very scary. Also from the poll, opinion on Donald Trump is basically split. A bunch of people have sort of no opinion of Donald Trump, but amongst those who have a favorable versus unfavorable opinion of Donald Trump in the Republican Party, it's basically split. That is very, very scary. And in terms of favorability, Mike Huckabee is currently the Republican who has the highest of those kind of nebulously in the possible or actual 2016 candidates. Mike Huckabee has the highest favorability rating, near 60%, followed by Marco Rubio, just a couple points behind Mike Huckabee. Surprised at that, Lewis?
Most favorable, Huckabee. I think I am. If all of this is true and accurate, the Republican Party is a joke.
Yeah, and the poll is it's stunning and grotesque all at the same time, and we will see in what way these results impact the election. But really weird stuff happening over on the Republican side right now. It's almost like they don't even know what direction to go in, which is kind of something we've been talking about for a while. You might know Jeanine Pirro. She's this former prosecutor, former judge who now is on Fox News. This is super interesting. Jeffy sent me his research about this very recently after this Muhammad cartoon contest that took place that Pam Geller set up in Arizona, which there was a shooting there. Was it Arizona or Texas? Now I'm forgetting. I believe it was Arizona. No, it was in Garland, Texas. I don't know. I don't know why I was thinking Arizona. In Garland, Texas, Jeanine Pirro decided to comment about free speech. Here's what she had to say about free speech. Take a listen.
Free speech in America is non-negotiable, no matter what the perceived consequences, no matter the worry about retribution from Islamic extremists. Period. End of the story. A primer. The First Amendment wasn't established to protect speech that everyone agrees with. The whole point is to protect even hate speech, speech that offends, speech that insults. Even that liberal icon of the Supreme Court, Justice William Brennan, wrote, "Government may not prohibit the expression of an idea simply because it finds it offensive or disagreeable." The Supreme Court ruling, burning of an American flag, burning of a cross, and cursing dead soldiers at their funerals by the Westboro Baptist Klan, all disgusting and repulsive to me, are protected by the First Amendment. Pam Geller's Draw the Profit contest in Garland, Texas pales in comparison to those examples. But because of her, many in the politically correct class want to rethink free speech because of the sensitivities of some.
Very clear position, right? Free speech above all else. Doesn't matter if it's offensive. Doesn't matter if people don't like it. Free speech above all else. Free speech must never, ever, ever be mitigated. Except, as Jeffy found out, what did Jeanine Pirro say about free speech back in 2011? And it was in the context of a Muslim who was preaching what they considered to be violence in the United States. What did she say about free speech and the First Amendment back then? Let's go to the video.
With the sort of political process.
You two are agreeing, KT.
Yeah, but he's not a newly converted, Islamist. He's been at this since the USS Cole bombing. He's been at this since September 11th.
Look, he was preaching in a mosque in Virginia openly.
Right.
Should we revisit the First Amendment, giving the violent rhetoric that this guy was involved in?
I'm not sure you want to go there, but
I do.
I don't get it, Lewis. Does Jeanine Pirro respect the First Amendment no matter what for all kinds of speech? Or does she think that the First Amendment needs to be revisited? Revisiting part of the Constitution? I didn't think that that was something that was, I thought that was blasphemy for the so-called constitutional right. Which of her two exactly opposite positions on the First Amendment is her real position?
I think that she is simultaneously holding both of these positions because one of them has to do with Muslims who want to say who want to say things that she doesn't want them to say, and the other has to do with being able to say whatever you want about Muslims, which the Muslims don't want you to do.
I see what you're saying. So
Yeah.
she has one position on the First Amendment based on Muslims, and then another position on the First Amendment based on those who criticize Muslims. So if you consider it that way, there's no contradiction at all. It's just the First Amendment applies differently based on who you are.
Right. It basically doesn't apply to Muslims, and it does apply to everyone else. That's her position.
A former judge, Janine Pirro, let me remind you, great research by Jeffy. Thanks for sending me that. On today's bonus show, the First Lady question, if Hillary Clinton were to become president of the United States. The Swedes get pretty clever at chasing away Russian submarines, crowdfunding a new nation, and Microsoft will no longer make versions of Windows. What will they do? Lewis will tell us. I'll tell you about my experiences with Windows freezing within 30 seconds of installing a brand new version of Windows. I'm sure some of our audience can relate to that. Make sure to get the bonus show by going to davidpakman.com/membership. We depend on funding through the membership program for this show. So if you like what we're doing, if you think 16 cents a day maybe is worthwhile for a show that's produced 5 times a week for you, davidpakman.com/membership is the place to, I would say vote with your dollars, but at 16 cents a day, it's almost like vote with your spare change. Check it out, davidpakman.com/membership. Back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Remember, you can support the David Pakman Show if you ever shop on Amazon.com. This is super easy. Just go to our website, davidpakman.com, and on the right side, there's a banner that takes you to Amazon. Click it. I recommend bookmarking the link and use it whenever you shop. Amazon will send us a little kickback for everything you buy. Of course, you can be a David Pakman Show member as well. Today's new member of the day is Philip Forsberg. Philip, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. Philip gets all the great member benefits, including the bonus show, commercial-free audio and podcast feed, an archive of the show that dates all the way back to the very beginning when the show was, quite frankly, a disaster. We do make those shows available to our members and lots more. Read about it at davidpakman.com/membership. 3 years ago this week, Michelle Bachmann rejected her Swiss citizenship just 2 days after she obtained it. She said that she became a Swiss citizen when she married her husband in the 1970s. Then she was asked, well, why didn't you disclose that when you ran for Senate? She said, well, it was just not really an issue because I've always been an American citizen. And it was really a shame that she even had to do this entire calculated thing where I am a Swiss citizen, now I'm rejecting the Swiss citizenship. I actually always was a Swiss citizen. I just never talked about it because the right would not really see that too kindly, would they?
No, it's a shame because, I mean, in many cases, you have politicians distancing themselves from their own heritage, and on both sides of the political system, but especially on the right.
Yeah, and remember, of course, when John Kerry was attacked for being too French, he spoke French, and it was just, he's too French, John French Kerry, as he was being called at the time. But wasn't one of the people who criticized him Newt Gingrich, who lived in France for a while because I think his dad was stationed there for some such other reason, and likely spoke at least some rudimentary French himself?
Well, he also attacked Mitt Romney for this. Newt Gingrich directly attacked Mitt Romney for this, for speaking French. And yeah, I mean, Mitt Romney spent a lot of time over there, of course, not really doing political work, but
Not exactly.
he learned French. And so what? Why is that a big deal?
I wonder if, or I guess I assume there will be sort of two factions within the Republicans now that we have Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, who are putatively Hispanic, right? And by I don't say putatively in a sarcastic way. I mean that they are Hispanic. And with regard to how their candidacies are presented, we will see what that actually means. There will probably be some on the right who welcome this as an opportunity to show how they actually are not anti-Hispanic by supporting one of these two guys, in spite of the fact that many of the policies they push would actually harm Hispanics and really all minorities, not just Hispanics. At the same time, there will probably be some out-and-out xenophobia from the right about these two guys as well.
No doubt. If you are an intelligent Republican, though, I think it would be wise to try and make your party look like it's more diverse.
2 years ago this week, remember when Abercrombie and Fitch CEO Mike Jeffries basically explained why he doesn't like fat chicks, right? There was this 2006 interview with Jeffries. It was rediscovered. It went completely viral a couple years ago. And in the interview, he said, we want to market to cool, good-looking people. We don't market to anyone other than that. Are we exclusionary? Absolutely. And he was then sort of forced into making one of the lamest apologies of all time, which was, while I believe this 7-year-old resurrected quote has been taken out of context, I sincerely regret, this is just one of the funniest apologies, I sincerely regret that my choice of words was interpreted in a manner that has caused offense. I mean, Lewis, if I've ever seen an I apologize that anyone was offended taken to the nth degree, it's this. He went on to say, we are completely opposed to any discrimination, bullying, derogatory characterizations, or any other antisocial behavior based on race, gender, body type, or individual characteristics. Apart from this, Abercrombie and Fitch also was added to the Sweatshop Hall of Fame 2010 by the worker advocacy group International Labor Rights Forum. And they also sold a line of thong underwear for girls in preteen children sizes with phrases like eye candy and wink wink printed on them. Lewis, let's say you accidentally had a kid. You love the kid. It just so happens it's a girl. At the preteen stage of life, what would you think about her being marketed to with eye candy thongs?
I think I would be outraged. And well, yeah, let me just say that I would never enter one of these stores with any child of mine or anyone else's child or any human being for that matter, I think is safe to say.
If you have any, you know how there's people who have very slight, or rather very serious, what would you call them? Scent sensitivities to different smells. If you have even a mild sensitivity to colognes and perfumes and unnatural odors, you shouldn't even walk near an Abercrombie and Fitch.
Oh yeah, you can smell it from 50 feet outside the door. It's incredible what they put in there. And I've always hated the place and always wondered why the pictures of all the people in a clothing store had no clothing on.
A protest group called Operation American Spring, remember this group, Lewis, 1 year ago this week, which was led by retired Army Colonel Harry Riley, planned to drive President Obama out of office. Their website is still up at operationamericanspring.org. The organizers claimed to have 30 million followers, and a year ago, they were finally ready to march on Washington. They lowered their turnout estimate. They said, listen, we have 30 million followers, but we're only expecting 1 million people to show up. And that would be quite impressive, Lewis, if they were able to get 1 million people based on, based on their fear-mongering around half-witted Benghazi conspiracies and anti-Obama propaganda. It turns out that maybe they had a couple hundred people that showed up. They did a demonstration on video, which included, I think, 12 people.
Yeah, there were some marches. They kind of walked around the Capitol. If I had to guess, I'd say there were at least a couple hundred people. Of course, not nearly enough to make any type of have any type of impact.
I'd love to hear from the T-Billy groups just a little bit of pragmatic reality where they say, listen, we've been trying to get Obama out of office for over 6 years at this point, and we think that even if we could get him out of office, we still believe we could, let's say, we could get him out of office. It's going to take more than the less than 2 years that he has left as president. So we're just going to sit back and wait at this point because he's going to be out before we do anything anyway.
I think that is a good decision. I mean, after 6 years, they haven't managed to do anything. And so what's two more? Just wait and assume that the next president will be a Republican.
Or at least someone that you believe is American, which for a lot of people would be a standard that President Obama has not met. This is the same thing I think about with Orly Tates, the queen of the birther movement. Every time she's on the show, I say to her, what's the end game? Because we interviewed her like after 2 years of Obama, after 4 years, and most recently after 6 years. And I say, what are you really trying to do now? I mean, he's going to be gone soon. And now I think the focus for some of the birthers is moving over into, well, doesn't matter when he's out, he should face criminal charges for being the president without being eligible to be president.
Yeah, I think she will probably continue this until the day she dies because she's crazy. She'll probably look for criminal charges or somehow try to have his presidency revoked retroactively.
So Operation American Spring. And I wonder, if your presidency is retroactively revoked, are all of the war crimes you're accused of also retroactively revoked or vacated because you weren't actually the president? That's a really good question.
For that to happen, I think you just need to stop being president, as we've seen with Bush.
Yeah, that's kind of a sad reality, actually. We've got a great program for you today. We have a great interview coming up and 3 very interesting audience questions that we'll tackle later on. And of course, the bonus show. I mean, who could go wrong with the bonus show? Sign up at davidpakman.com/membership.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
We are starting to get into election season, and we're going to go back to an interview we did in March of 2011 with Massachusetts Congressman Michael Capuano, who, for me, has always been one of the more interesting members of Congress, actual politicians we've interviewed, because as we've talked about, most of the time when we interview an elected official, they say as little as possible, and they essentially just recite talking points. And the conversation we were able to have in our studio at the time in Massachusetts with Congressman Capuano was really, really interesting. We talked about the Gabrielle Giffords shooting and congressional safety. We talked about campaign finance, which is a big issue and something that Bernie Sanders is talking about. So this interview is one of my favorite interviews with an elected official, and also very relevant given what's going on in this very early election season now. Let's take a look. Thrilled to have Congressman Mike Capuano, Democrat from Massachusetts, here in the studio with us. Great to see you.
Great to be here.
I don't want to focus on the past for the majority of the interview, but I'm still interested in talking with you about what happened when Scott Brown won his Senate special election. And in full disclosure, I supported you in that election. I did not support Martha Coakley. And it wasn't, part of it was ideological, but part of it was I thought you had a better chance of beating Scott Brown than Martha Coakley did. How much do you think about exactly what happened? Do you think about the narrative I'm thinking about, or do you think about it differently?
A little bit of everything, but you can replay anything 1,000 times in your head, and I look back and think of the things that I did right, the things that I did wrong. In any campaign, you learn from both.
Well, in terms of lessons learned, you said, I've never entered a race where I thought it wasn't worth losing if I lost. So, I mean, specifically from that race, what did you gain, or what did you learn?
Well, I think I gained the ability to, a true understanding of what it takes to run statewide, what it takes to raise the kind of money that you have to raise to do that, what it takes out of your own personal life. I mean, you had to travel all over the state and know it's a small state compared to many. It's a big state when you have to travel it. And so I learned that. I also learned that there are a lot of good people out there that really care about these issues. And not as many as I'd like, obviously. But so for me, I like anything else. No one gets into a race. I shouldn't say no one. Very few people get into a race knowing and thinking that they would lose.
See, I think a lot of people do. I think a lot of when they have a lot of money. I think a lot of people go in knowing they will lose the election, but like you said, maybe they're winning something else in their minds.
I don't know if they're winning just ego or ego gratification. That's an incredible waste of time and other people's energy. Because when you do this, it's not just you. You're asking other people to donate. You're asking other people to give their time and to give their commitment and to believe in you. And I think if you go into it thinking, I can't win, but I have a statement to make, I think that's incredibly egotistical. The idea is we're supposed to represent the views and hopes and dreams of other people, not in every detail, but in general. And if you're not ready to do that, then you really shouldn't waste their time. If you want to waste your own time, put your name on the ballot and saying, I know I can't win, but I have something to say. The rent's too high, or whatever.
Too damn high.
Whatever you want to say, that's fine.
Yeah.
But at least then you're not asking anybody else to give up, or I shouldn't say you're not asking, but at least they know what they're getting into.
Well, you mentioned it's about what other people want. And on my show, I've been talking to anybody that will listen to me about the fact that I think that increasingly the large government at the Washington, D.C. level doesn't really represent people's interests. It represents overwhelmingly corporate interest. And we've seen this. I mean, my favorite example, and my audience will be bored by this, but I'll bring it up anyway, is net neutrality, which is before the net neutrality hearings, Fred Upton from Michigan gets money from Comcast, Verizon.
Yep.
There's even a lobby, the NCTA, as if these companies on their own don't have enough power that will lobby for them. Imagine that. So it was we knew what the result would be. And effectively enough, Fred Upton said, I don't think we need to worry about exactly what Comcast is doing. I haven't found any aspect of government that can't or hasn't been bought or sold. And I think the people's interests are losing there.
But a lot of that's not new. And the question is, in the sense it's not just recent. It's from day one, 1776. We had a whole bunch of relatively wealthy white men running the country. They had their own special interests. And thank God, they led into where we are at the moment. So I take it from the position that, look, we know that government is never perfect. It's not going to work the way we want it on a regular basis. The question is, how many times can we get it to work the right way?
To go back, is the system best served in your sense? And I know that we can say, well, it's hard to just change the system overnight. I get that. But is the system best served by, in your case, Genzyme, Eli Lilly, Partners Healthcare,
No.
companies that have an interest in you voting a certain way?
No, absolutely not. That's why I favor public financing. I think public financing is the only way out of it, because you do need some money to get your message across. Now, I've always thought that you don't need the amount of money that some people think you do, but you do if we're running for the same office and you have $1 gazillion. I may not need a gazillion, but I need some money to get my message out so that people will hear the differences between us. Anyway, I think until we get to the point where we really get tired of it, nothing will change. And right now, whether I like it or not, the court has said that corporations can directly influence
They're
elections.
people too.
Right. Yeah, they're people too. I haven't figured that one out still, but they did say it, and we're a land of laws, whether we like it or not on occasion.
But when you say until people get tired, the thing that I see, to go back to that net neutrality example, the people who have the control aren't going to get tired because they have the money.
Why should they? No,
but in other words,
them.
our show, if all of a sudden Comcast says, you know what, when you're streaming NBC online, it's going to look great. But when you're streaming the David Pakman show, it's gonna have to buffer, the quality won't be good. I'm going to be tired of that right away. I just have no power to influence it.
But my hope is, and I don't know this, my hope is that there will be enough people who will realize it right away. Now, they may not. And if they don't, well, then they will get the government and the service that they actually want, surprisingly enough. I totally agree with you. I think the net neutrality thing is hilarious because up until recently, we had net neutrality laws, and we're acting as if we never did.
I talked to Wendell Potter, who wrote the book Deadly Spin, former Cigna vice president of corporate communications, basically a spin expert, self-described.
Yep.
And he actually says that while there are good things in the healthcare bill that passed, his concern is it's further locking in the for-profit system by putting more people in it.
I don't disagree. But again, I don't live in the world where I can write the bill that I wanted. That's
From
not
scratch,
the bill that I wanted. Yeah. When you get to vote on a bill, like anything else, you get to vote on the best bill you can get. And when you vote, I have never voted for or even against. Even things I've voted against doesn't mean that I've hated everything in the bill. There are almost all the time I vote for bills one way or the other that have either something I like or something I don't like, and that was no different. That's not. I will defend the healthcare bill as a step in the right direction. I will not defend it as my thought of what we should have done. I think we should have done a lot more.
In the last couple of minutes we have, you took some heat for this comment you made about unions. Every once in a while, you need to get out on the streets and get a little bloody when necessary. And since then, you've said maybe those weren't the right words.
One word was wrong, and I shouldn't have used it. But that's But at the same time, other than the extreme right wing who want to make something out of it, most average people understood what I was trying to say. I used the wrong word. I apologize for the use of the wrong word. But the spirit behind that comment is absolutely right. You have to fight and stand for what you believe in. And I think most people know that and they accept that. Again, my terminology could have and should have been a little better, but most average thinking adults know exactly what I meant by that. And by the way, I wasn't calling on anybody else to bloody anyone else. I was saying what is historically accurate is that most people that have ever made progress in this world have received violence against them. The union movement, the civil rights movement, the human rights movement, the women's movement were the victims in those situations. And when they called in the Pinkertons to break up union rallies, they weren't coming to pass out flowers. And so, again, that doesn't make the term right. It just means that was the thought and the spirit behind it. I believe that most thinking neutral adults understand that and understand that, okay, I picked the wrong word in the current. If I had said this a year ago before Gabby Giffords got shot, no one would have mentioned it. But it was the wrong thing. I apologize for the use of the word, not for the spirit behind the phrase.
Well, going to the Gabby Giffords thing, I mean, I've talked to several members of Congress since that, and I asked them, are you looking over your shoulder more when you're in downtown Northampton walking around? I mean, what's...
I guess slightly, but not that much, no. I mean, I look, politicians live a very public life. I mean, people recognize you, people know where they stand, people get very upset about whatever it is you do. But that's not new. I've been doing this a while now, and I've had people excited both for and against whatever positions I take. Is your sense that in the future, you experienced it firsthand with the bloody comment? My concern is that everything now is being held up to this kind of false equivalency that the mainstream media likes to do, where it's ridiculous.
On the one hand, target map from Sarah Palin. On the other hand,
and
your
plus
comment...
You didn't hear anything from the very same people criticizing me the most. 2 days after I said that, the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, had a comment that said unions have machine guns against the head of the American people. No comment. You didn't hear the extreme. The very same people criticizing me had nothing to say about that comment. John Boehner and calling the redefinition of rape a, quote, top priority. We're seeing 10, 14, 15 attempts to repeal or defund the Obama health care bill. Yep. At the state level, we're seeing proposals like maybe we should enable the death penalty in the case of a miscarriage. What's behind this? I asked Congressman Neal about this, and to be honest, I'm not exactly sure even still what his position on it is. What is the source of this? I don't know what the source of it is. I mean, in Congress, you have to understand, when the Republicans were in charge the last time, they love these issues that slice and dice us apart. Abortion is one of those issues that hits a very raw nerve on many, many people. I am clearly and unequivocally pro-choice, and I will stand pro-choice every day, all day. I've had, on the Planned Parenthood issue, I recently had the owner of so-called pregnancy centers in New York, a man named Chris Slattery, and I knew that his pregnancy centers weren't even licensed medical facilities. He was arguing for defunding Planned Parenthood, and I said, well, where would the people go? Because 97% of what Planned Parenthood does is not abortion-related. Right. And he said, well, they could come to my pregnancy centers. And when I questioned him about, are they licensed medical facilities, he attacked me personally. He asked if I was working for Planned Parenthood. He ended up hanging up on me. So there's a lot of misinformation, but that's literally dangerous to suggest someone go to an unlicensed facility instead of Planned Parenthood, is it not? I don't know that one. But again, there's a lot of people that have both deep philosophical positions and have personal positions that are involved in this issue. And again, I've gotten in trouble with some of my pro-choice friends because I strongly defend the people who are pro-life to demonstrate and to express their opinion. I think that's a good thing. It is a difficult issue. Congressman Mike Capuano, Democrat from Massachusetts, thanks so much for coming in. Thanks, Dave.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's that time of the week, time to answer some audience questions. We've answered at this point several hundred of these audience questions over the last 5 or so years, and still a lot of material untouched. So please submit your questions, ideally via email on our website, but you can also tweet them. You can leave them on our Facebook page or on our Reddit discussion forum, whatever is your choice. First question is from Sonia. do attractive people get benefits that others don't? I have data on this, Lewis, but before I present the data, what's your gut reaction?
Without a doubt, yes, of course. I think it is very, very common. Probably all over the world, not just here.
So what do the studies say about this? Studies say that people are more likely to be assumed both more intelligent and more good if they are more attractive. Numerous studies have replicated this. There's a study from the University of Texas at Austin, which shows that beautiful people are actually happier, but not for the same reasons. For handsome men, it appears to be because of the economic benefits, and there have been higher salaries linked to being more attractive. And for women, it appears that women are more apt to find joy from looking in the mirror if they're more attractive. That's a study from UT Austin. We also know from some anecdotal studies that are not quite as comprehensive that makeup makes women appear more likable in studies, and this could be for a number of reasons. There could be a number of different interpretations. But the long and short of it, Lewis, is that on the one hand, we see that handsome men are poised to make about 13% more during their career than a looks-challenged peer with similar education and career experience, etc. And we also just see the way in which media sort of glorifies attractiveness, and we know that that filters down into the average person's perception of others. So I think that it is completely undeniable that in modern, industrialized United States of America, being more attractive absolutely has tangible life benefits with regard to how you're treated, with regard to salaries, as we've seen in many cases, with so many different things. However, the more interesting question to me is something you started to talk about, Lewis, which is this just inherent to human nature, or was there a time where traits that are different than attractiveness would have been more advantageous? When we go back to humans in a more state of nature, in a sort of hunter-gatherer type situation, you would think that physical attractiveness is not going to be the guiding factor. It's going to be who here can provide for my family by capturing food, regardless of how attractive they are. Don't you think?
You would think, but I'm not convinced of that. I think that perhaps back then it might have even been more prominent, this attractiveness thing.
How do you figure?
Well, I mean, I just at a time where you don't really have a resume, or you don't really have access to information like we do now, maybe those attractive people had even more pull or more sway.
I also wonder if the sort of range of attractiveness was as big when humans were closer to a state of nature as it is today. A big thing today has been health and appearance and what people have access to in terms of clothing, makeup, surgical procedures, whatever. Depends greatly on where you are on the economic scale. And you would think that at a time longer ago, when humans were closer to a state of nature, that there was more sort of homogeneity to the range of physical appearance for individuals, people eating a more sort of unified diet, people having access to similar skin products, which were basically none at all. I think that could also be a factor, that there was less of a sort of range of attractiveness at a certain point.
There could have been. And I would also ask, what percentage of really attractive people aren't even aware that they are getting these added benefits in society today?
This is a very good point. Yeah. Many people argue that the benefits of being attractive become sort of transparent if you're part of the group, in the same way that a lot of people don't really get what the benefits of white privilege in white-dominated society would be. That's another interesting thing, which is when you're part of the sort of agent identity, does the impact of being a member of that group sort of become invisible to you? And I think you're saying it very well may.
Yeah, I think it could. I think I've seen that happen before. And I'm thinking of John Hamm's character from 30 Rock, which is a great character.
Harper wrote in and said, "Hey, David, both you and Lewis have said you've not been the victims of violent crime like mugging or burglary, etc. Have either of you ever experienced sexual harassment? Let's define sexual harassment as unwelcome sexual behavior that takes place in person or electronically." And this could include, what you include under that could certainly range, and it would be different for different people. But let's use that as the sort of base definition. Have you, Lewis, been the victim of sexual harassment? Anything you would consider that?
Well, if people grabbing my ass means sexual harassment, then I would say yes. But have I ever been a victim of it or experienced it and been offended or insulted or outraged? The answer to that is no. At least not that I can remember.
I think the argument would be, some would make the argument, let me run this by you and see how it sounds to you, Lewis, that even though you didn't ask for, nor did you give any indication that it was okay to grab your ass in these scenarios that you dictate. So certainly that could be considered sexual harassment. However, we could also argue that the fact that if we were to learn more about the environment you were in was not one in which you were in a position of lack of power, for example. The situation you were in communicated to you that you were not in any actual physical danger, etc. It could be argued that the reason you don't really consider it to have been sexual harassment is because you did not feel that you were in any way at risk and that you were completely in control of whether the ass grabbing was to continue or not, right? I mean, am I right about those kind of scenario characteristics?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And while the definition says unwelcome, it still may have been unwelcome. So I guess by definition, it might still be sexual harassment, but it didn't bother me.
I wish either one of us had a more sort of acute story about it. I mean, I have none. I can't think of anything that would come even close to sexual harassment that I'm aware of. I mean, certainly when people have done edits of images of me in sexually graphic ways on the internet, it's a sort of sexual harassment, I guess. I'm being portrayed in a sexual way that was certainly unwelcome. But the reality is I found it more funny than anything else, and I did not feel in any way in danger or as if I was being bullied or anything like that. So I can say with complete honesty that I have no recollection of any incident that I would consider to be sexual harassment.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think a couple of boring answers from us on this topic, but that's, we're not going to fabricate anything.
That's for sure. Lewis would never make up stories. That's not something he would ever do. I can't speak for myself, but Lewis certainly wouldn't. No, I'm kidding. That's a reference actually to, there's like a very small group of YouTube commenters now who are going into lots of our videos and saying that anytime I tell a personal story, like, oh, this happened at the airport or this is what went on at this restaurant, that I'm just making it up. And I'll be honest, if I was making up stories, I would make them way more interesting than the ones I actually tell. I think that's something you would agree with, Lewis.
Yeah, if these stories are fake, then you are the worst storyteller of all time.
Third question today is from Ethan. Ethan says, which polls will you trust going into the 2016 election cycle? This is a great question because if we just wait until the polls start coming and we get further into the election cycle, we could be accused of sort of cherry picking which polls we believe or which polls we don't believe. So let's get it out on the table right now as far as which polls will we trust. I'm going to go on record now, Lewis, if I may, if you're prepared for me to do this, and say, I don't actually care that much about any individual poll, whether it's Pew or Gallup or Rasmussen or PPP, left-leaning, right-leaning, whatever. I don't care. And when I say I don't care, I don't mean that it doesn't matter what they say. But what I mean is I will be paying attention to what I have been paying attention now for many years and what was most accurate in the 2012 presidential election, which is Nate Silver and his sort of poll of polls, his aggregation of all polling data, and Sam Wong. Sam Wong does something very similar to what Nate Silver does, albeit with different methodology, but sort of telling us based on all the data we have, here is what is looking as the most likely scenario. That's what I will be paying attention to. So if now you're saying, David, go on the record and say Pew is left-leaning or Pew is right-leaning, I don't care. I'm not going to be getting into that. I'm sure we will be citing all sorts of different polling and covering the 2016 election. But in really getting a sense myself of where the election is, I'll be looking at Nate Silver and Sam Wong unequivocally.
Agreed. When I see a poll, I think to myself, okay, that's interesting. Maybe this poll is accurate, and I'll just kind of keep it in the back of my mind. But I do not actually really believe any of the pollsters. I don't really trust any of them.
And look at what happened to Mitt Romney based on the pollsters he was trusting. It seems like, based on that documentary, Mitt, that's on Netflix, like he really was surprised that in spite of the poll of polls showing that President Obama clearly was going to win, he seemed to think he was going to win. That's because he was listening to right-wing state polls from his own team that were ultimately worth essentially nothing.
Right. And so, it's dangerous. I mean, obviously, once in a while, you'll see a poll that is just completely absurd. I mean, you know the ones that you can't trust. But generally speaking, I mean, they all have margins of error, and I just don't trust any of them. But Nate Silver
the good thing, Lewis, is that if you look at something like Nate Silver or Sam Wong's work, you can completely forego the need to figure out whether one outlier poll is crazy or just happens to have really hit the nail on the head. You don't need to worry about that.
Yeah, they do all the work for us, and it's great with shocking accuracy, mind you.
If you disagree with my plan, if you think there is a better way for us in our coverage of the 2016 election to get a handle, the most accurate possible handle on what the polling data says, tell us, because we're still early enough in this thing to change the strategy. Great bonus show today, davidpakman.com/membership to sign up for membership, get access to that bonus show. The bonus show today is so good that I won't even tell you what's on it. You'll just have to figure it out for yourselves once it starts in only a few minutes.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.